Hello and welcome. I'm Devika Devan and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The US Senate has rejected two competing bills to pay federal workers during the 23-day government shutdown, leaving many without pay. Meanwhile, US President Trump has announced a wealthy donor contributed $130 million to cover military salary shortfalls. US President Donald Trump has said that he would immediately halt all trade negotiations with Canada. This comes after a Canadian advertisement targeted Trump's tariffs plan. He further criticized Canada, calling it a quote-unquote cheater. In a stunning political turn, New York City Mayor Eric Adams has endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the city's mayoral race. Adams has previously criticized Cuomo, called him a snake and liar. Marco Rubio has warned that Israel's move towards annexing the West Bank could undermine President Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Speaking before departing for Israel, Rubio said the president had made it clear that any such annexation is not something that we'd be supportive of right now, calling the Knesset vote potentially counterproductive. US President Donald Trump has dismissed efforts by Israeli lawmakers to advance legislation annexing the occupied West Bank, saying Israel is not going to do anything there. The bill, which would apply Israeli law to the territory claimed by Palestinians for a future state, won initial approval in the Knesset on Wednesday. US President Donald Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea on the 30th of October on the sidelines of the APEC summit. The White House has confirmed it will be the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders since Trump's return to office, as trade tensions rise over Washington's threat of 100% tariffs and Beijing's restrictions on rare earth exports. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia is analyzing latest Western sanctions and will act according to its own interests. He further emphasized that Russia is not against anyone else. Argentine President Javier Milei has urged supporters at a Rosario rally ahead of Sunday's midterms. Milei seeks votes to sustain his austerity policies, economic reforms and labor and tax plans amid pressure from the US and slipping approval ratings. Our top focus in New York City, outgoing Mayor Eric Adams has formally endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo to succeed him in the upcoming mayoral elections. Adams, who ended his re-election bid last month amid corruption allegations, appeared alongside Cuomo at a press briefing and called him the right person for the fight for the family of New York. Let's in fact listen in.
For the family of New York. That's why I'm here today, to endorse Andrew Cuomo to be part of this fight. And I'm going to give him my all these next few days. Well, you criticized Andrew and you called him names. You know what? And he called me names. But you know what? Now it's time to fight for the family. And I'm going to fight for the family with Andrew Cuomo as the next mayor of the city of New York.
Cuomo, who is running as an independent candidate, praised Adams for putting aside political differences and urged voters to reject what he described as divisive politics. The endorsement marks a significant turn in the race, with Cuomo now emerging as a key contender ahead of the November vote. Listen in.
And we all have to do our best to make sure that Zoran does not become the next mayor. And the mayor put his own personal ambition and ego aside to make sure he's doing everything he can to make sure that New York remains New York. New Yorkers vote, I win. New Yorkers vote, I win. New Yorkers reject this socialism, reject division. If New Yorkers vote, I win. What we want to do is just make sure New Yorkers know how important this election is and what's at stake, and get New Yorkers up and out to vote. That's it.
Mr. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us from Washington. Mr. Vickery, I have to begin by understanding, from your perspective, what's really at stake as far as these elections are concerned?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that what's at stake is really the direction of the Democratic Party and opposition to President Trump. The candidacy of Mandami has been characterized as far left and socialistic, and to some extent there are elements in that in terms of housing, in terms of grocery stores, in terms of what happens with the system of public transportation. And what's really happening here is whether or not the Democratic Party is going to move sharply to the left. And Cuomo, I think, does not want to see that. Adams is really now in the pocket of President Trump, and he doesn't want to see that either. I think that this is a sign that we still have a healthy democracy, at least in New York City, and the election will take place in a fair and equitable manner. You can't say that for the rest of the nation, but that is the assessment here for New York City.
At the same time, Mr. Vickery, what do you make of this latest endorsement by Eric Adams, who has now endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo after initially dismissing him?
I think it's pure politics. I think that it's not really based upon any principles. It's a question of Adams, who had been under pressure for both his relations with President Trump, his willingness to do his bidding on immigration, as well as his own corruption problems, simply seeing a political way to remain relevant. So it's a messy process. But it's one that you come to expect in the politics of New York City.
All right, Mr. Vickery, stay on with us as we shift our focus to more news from the United States of America. The U.S. Senate has rejected two competing bills aimed at paying federal workers during the ongoing government shutdown, which is now stretched into its 23rd day. Both Republicans and Democrats have blocked each other's proposals, as many federal employees are now set to miss their first full paycheck this week. Now, the Republican-backed bill was introduced by Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and it sought to guarantee pay for federal workers who continue to report for duty during shutdowns. However, it failed to reach the 60-vote threshold needed to advance, with only 3 Democrats breaking ranks to support it. Meanwhile, Democrats have argued that the Republican bill would give the president excessive authority to decide which workers receive pay. In response, they've proposed 2 countermeasures to cover all federal employees, including those furloughed, neither of which received a vote. The government deadlock began earlier this month, remember, after lawmakers failed to agree on a new federal budget. As a result, around 7 lakh government workers have been furloughed, while many others continue working without pay. In the midst of the stalemate, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that a wealthy private donor has contributed $130 million to the U.S. government to help cover possible shortfalls in military salaries. Trump has also praised the donor as a patriot, but did not disclose his name. Additionally, Trump also earlier signed an executive order directing the Pentagon to repurpose unused research funds to cover salaries, which is a move that budget experts have described as legally questionable. Mr. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us from Washington. Mr. Vickery, I have to firstly ask you, sir, what are the constitutional and perhaps other implications of the US president using private donations and repurposed research funds to pay military salaries?
Well, I think unlike the assessment in regard to what's happening in New York City politics as being pro-democracy, this shows a real breakdown in terms of our constitutional form of government in the United States. For over 200 or almost 250 years, we have had a system of checks and balances in which the purse strings, according to the Constitution of the federal government, are in the Congress. The Congress has not stepped up to exercise its constitutional checks and balances mandate. And therefore, what's happening here is that the executive branch under President Trump is trying to circumvent the ordinary procedure by going to private donors. And this has really very, very serious consequences for democracy. If you have wealthy individuals who are supplying the wherewithal, the constitutional checks and balances, control of the purse, which are in our Constitution and have served us very well, are circumvented. So the whole government shutdown is really a desperation move, if you will, to try to get Congress to stand up, the legislative branch, as is constitutionally mandated, to provide a check on the executive power. The immediate issue, of course, is one of the affordable health care and whether or not you're going to have some continuation of the subsidies which have enabled people to continue to have health insurance. And without them, without these subsidies, millions will lose their health care coverage. But it's really just symptomatic of the overall problem, and that is one of adherence to constitutional norms which have served this country. You know, democracy can't be just one vote, one person, one time. It has to be in an institutional way in which minority rights are protected. And unfortunately, President Trump and the executive branch have not seen fit to follow the precedents which have served us for 250 years.
All right, Mr. Vikri, I request you to stay on with us as more interesting developments take place. US President Donald Trump has announced that he is ending all trade negotiations with Canada, citing a Canadian television advertisement opposing US tariffs that he said distorted the facts and represented egregious behavior aimed at influencing US court decisions on tariffs. President Trump, in a Truth Social post, criticized Canada, stating that it cheated and got caught. This comes on as Ontario's Premier Doug Ford promoted the disputed ad last week in a post on X, writing that Ontario's new advertising campaign in the US has launched. His administration has imposed a 35% levy on many Canadian imports, as well as individual tariffs targeting particular industries like car and steel manufacturing, by which Ontario has been particularly hard hit. Although Trump has allowed exemptions for goods that fall under a free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, which was negotiated during his first term, it seems as though relations are souring for the worse. Mr. Raymond Vikri with us on the broadcast. Mr. Vikri, I have to understand from you, what do you make of this latest tariff war, this time now with Canada? Mr. Raymond Vikri, not with us on the broadcast. All right. Meanwhile, New York Attorney General Letitia James is scheduled to appear in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia, to be arraigned on charges of alleged mortgage fraud after she was indicted earlier this month by U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan. James, who successfully brought a civil fraud case against Trump last year and leads multiple lawsuits challenging his administration's policies, was indicted on charges that she committed mortgage fraud related to a home that she purchased in 2020. According to the indictment, James falsely described the property as a second home to get an advantageous mortgage rate, but used it as an investment property rented to a family of 3. The indictment alleged James collected thousands of dollars in rent and would have saved $17,837 over the life of the mortgage versus a loan at a higher rate. Meanwhile, Russia's top economic envoy has arrived in the United States for official talks just days after President Donald Trump announced tough new sanctions on Russia. According to sources, Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and a Kremlin special envoy are expected to meet Trump administration officials to continue discussions about the U.S.-Russia relationship. Dmitriev is expected to first meet with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, although meetings with other U.S. officials could follow as well. The visit comes amid growing U.S. frustration over the Kremlin's refusal to end its war with Ukraine, and after Trump said he had cancelled a planned summit with his Kremlin counterpart Vladimir Putin. This also follows the imposition of sanctions by the U.S. on 2 of Russia's biggest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. Mr. Mark Sutherland, geopolitical expert, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Sutherland, what do you make of the latest developments between Russia and the US? Do you believe that the current meetings could bring about some positive developments?
Very good to be with you again. As you know, on the one hand, some people could say this is theatre. We've had Alaska, the meetings in regard to, it looks like, taking place in Budapest when Hungary offered that. Is that still on the table? Is it off the table? Then we've had all this threat of putting Tomahawk missiles in the theatre of war with a range of 1,500 miles, or anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 miles. These threats, we're seeing all the drones against Russian energy infrastructure, but then the same against Ukraine. So there's a lot going on. We also know many months ago, before President Trump came in, because he said, I have a relationship with President Vladimir Putin. I'll get Vlad around the table, eventually get Zelenskyy around the table. I can sort this out in a few days, and very sadly, we have not seen that yet since the invasion of February 2022. As I've always said, when I have these delighted to have these conversations on NewsX channel, it's saying, you know, talk is better than people firing missiles at each other. But the problem is, we've got to get them around the table to end this war. And in between that discussion, the military actions are not going to stop. They are going to continue and continue until, if we get to the point of an actual end to this war. So it's not about suddenly having a ceasefire. It's got to go straight to an end of the war. Putin has made that very clear since Alaska, and of course Dmitriev as well, and the Russian administration has made that very clear.
All right, Ms. Sutherland, stay on with us as we shift our focus to more news. This time from the UK, where British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy to 10 Downing Street in London today ahead of the Coalition of the Willing meeting. The visit is focused on strengthening international support for Ukraine and reinforcing coordination amongst allies. In the meeting, British PM Starmer has emphasized the need to press on Russian energy sanctions and expand long-term defense capabilities. Additionally, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has warned that Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure are escalating ahead of winter, underlining the urgency for international action. Let's listen in.
Yes, I agree with you, and that Putin doesn't show that he wants to stop the war, and he really began steps in pushing us to such humanitarian disaster. What he wants to organize this winter is, of course, with attacks on energy, on gas, on water supplies. It's understandable what to do. I'm very thankful to you that we are not alone in this situation from the very beginning of war, but especially now it's very important.
Mr. Mark Sutherland, geopolitical expert with us on the broadcast. Mr. Sutherland, I have to understand from you, where do you think the conversations and the negotiations vis-a-vis the Russia-Ukraine war are headed, given that the EU also continues to face a little bit of a stalemate? What role do you think the UK is hoping to play here?
Well, without me sounding too cynical, but we have to say this. Of course, any opportunity that Keir Starmer can look as though he's on the world stage and steer away from some of the problems that we have here in the UK is an advantage that he will take with both hands, because next minute he'll be flying off to COP, whatever number that is, in Brazil. We have always seen many photo opportunities of him standing by Zelenskyy, of course, then promising more financial support to support Ukraine. That's on the table, that's playing out. And as I have said countlessly, we need the two sides to come together genuinely. Otherwise, we could see even more of an escalation of this war on both sides. That could happen. And as is said, Zelenskyy recently, a few days ago, was talking about, when he was talking to President Trump, and Trump is saying, you know, this needs to stop now. We have a ceasefire now at where the Russian army is, where the Ukraine army is in regard to defensively, and then withdraw that line. E.g., President Trump was saying that whatever land has been taken, then that's up for negotiations in regard to the Donbass, in regard to Crimea, and other land that has been taken after the illegal invasion on February 2022. There is so much in this mix, and we have to work hard to go through the sort of theatre and the puppetry that is being played out. And remember that this is affecting people's lives, because on the Russian side, we've seen 1 million people die. We've seen all the devastation in the Ukraine, and also the many thousands of people that have died on the Ukrainian military side as well. And you know, within Russia, it's not doing their economy any good either. So all of this is in the mix. Yes, without sounding too sarcastic, if then it helps Zelenskyy to get round the table with Putin, well, then various people need to pick up the phone and stop this. And also, of course, the Russians have sent drones, we think, into Poland, testing other European countries as well. There has to be a firm response to that. But we need the people around the table to have a discussion to end this now.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Sutherland, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. And with that, it's a wrap on America 360. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world on the other side.